Well, welcome back to our final day. I think it's been kind of nice that we've only been going till noon, because then that gives us the afternoon to either like keep working or to continue having break before the crazy starts back on Monday. So our slam today is distance learning best practices. We have a handful of presenters. Again, Brianna Gann, District EdTech, and I'm going to be talking about a strategy called Cyber Sandwich. Next.
I'm Caroline Edwards, and I'm going to be talking about digital choice boards.
Mark Gomez, and I'll be talking about the use of inquiry to drive instruction.
And Gaston, and I'll be co-presenting with Amber Dodd, and we're gonna have a grading with equity conversation.
Hi everybody, I'm Amber Dodd.
Hi, I'm Ashley Schaefer. I'm going to be talking about social emotional learning check-ins.
And I'm Jen Rogers, other District EdTech, and I'm going to be talking about harnessing the power of social media in your classroom.
Awesome. So if you've been with us all week, you're probably familiar with our schedule. If not, I'm going to go over it again. So our first hour is going to be a slam. So each presenter will be spending 5 to 7 minutes discussing their strategy or tool or whatever it is that they're presenting on. And then our second hour, so you'll take a 15-minute break. You'll come back at 10:15. You'll head to a breakout room with the presenter of your choice, where you'll get a deeper dive into that topic and learn more about whatever their best practice slam was. Then you'll take another little break and you'll come back to the sandbox. In the sandbox, it's really 45 minutes for you to ask any more questions that you have, to work on implementing or creating whatever it is that you learned, so that you can have something tangible to use next week. With your students. So that third hour is really about time for you to incorporate the practice. Know that you need to sign in each time. So you signed in this morning, and then you'll sign in when you come back for the second hour. Your presenter will have a link for you, and then you'll sign in again for the third hour. Again, you'll come back to that breakout room and your presenter will have a link for you there as well.
Okay, I know that there are some people here today that were not here the last other days, so we'll repeat the expectations and norms. We are all doing a great job of participating positively. I know there's been a lot of learning, growing, and innovating happening this week. It's been very exciting. And make sure you're giving your speakers complete attention as best you can, engaging in the chat to ask questions and share ideas. During the slam session, please keep your mic muted because it will be going pretty quickly, and you'll have a chance to ask questions in the chat or save them for the deeper dive where you can ask and discuss with your presenter one-on-one. And again, as Brianna said, make sure that you sign in at the beginning of each individual session. Please don't pre-sign in because we know stuff happens and you might not be able to come to a later session, and it messes up our payroll paperwork and makes a lot more work for us. So please don't pre-sign in. And during the sandbox, we are going to have a Padlet for everybody to share what they've been working on, or a link to something that they made, or any ideas or brainstorms that came up during your deep dive and sandbox. So the sharing is one of the most powerful parts of this PD events that we're doing, because we're all working together to create things and sharing. It's really exciting. And in case of technical difficulties, just carrying on as best as you can.
I also want to point out that we will be sharing all those Padlets with the district in our newsletter some point next week. And then we'll also, if we remember, some of us have forgotten, but we're recording each of the sessions, and we'll be uploading them to our YouTube channel sometime next week. So you'll be able to go watch sessions that maybe you weren't able to attend. Okay. Ooh, I'm up first today. I've been up last all the time. So I'm going to be talking about a strategy called Cyber Sandwich. So hopefully you've had breakfast and you're not hungry. Otherwise, maybe you'll be hungry. Okay, so students can easily copy facts from Wikipedia and create reports in minutes, right? But how do we move students out of that cycle of copy and paste? So a cyber sandwich is a strategy for encouraging collaboration. I want to point out that all my sessions this week have been encouraging collaboration among students in a distance learning format. So a cyber sandwich is another way that they can dive deeper into some kind of content with a partner or even groups of 4 to create something about their learning. And so a cyber sandwich is a protocol from Edu Protocols. So if you've never heard of Edu Protocols, they have a bunch of cool strategies that you can use, and they have transformed those strategies into distance learning. Well, they've taken ones that they've done in the classroom and they've modified them for distance learning. So if you've never checked out Edu Protocols, the link, if you click here where the little button is, this binoculars will take you to the Edu Protocols website. So that might be something that you want to bookmark for later to go back and look at, because cyber sandwich is just one of the strategies that they have. So what is a cyber sandwich? So a cyber sandwich helps you break the copy and paste cycle, right? Especially right now, online students can so easily copy and paste. This is a fight that I have with my 5th grader all the time, copying and pasting. I'm like, do you even know what that word means? Or do you see that the highlight is still in the background? So cyber sandwich strategy can help break that cycle. You can use a textbook, you can use online articles or videos, political cartoons, or other things for students to analyze in a cyber sandwich. You're able to scale up or down the DOK levels of questions that you're asking. So it helps to build critical thinking. And then in the end, they're ultimately coming up with a summary, or maybe they're creating a Canva or another way to show what they've learned through the process of the cyber sandwich. So how do they do this? They collaborate in pairs to read the research articles or the videos or the political cartoons. They record their notes. They create kind of a Venn diagram where they're able to compare and contrast their notes. And then they can write summary paragraphs and they can present their findings. So it's really a way to help them deeper dive and help them collaborate in pairs. So what does that look like? Cyber sandwich, I'm going to show you what it looks like. So in here is links to some examples that you can check out. But the classic cyber sandwich, in my session, we're going to be looking at the classic. We're also going to be looking at the craft, and we'll be looking at the taco. So there's different ways that people have expanded this idea of a cyber sandwich. Oops. I'm going to show you one real quick. Here's a template. I'm going to show you real quick. So in a cyber sandwich, there's normally just 2 people, but I have seen it where people have used multiple, like four students. So students read, right? They read or they watch a video and they collect their notes. You can provide them questions. So student 1 and student 2 both have a slide where they keep their notes. Then they write their notes. They summarize their notes again in their sandwich, right? And then they compare together what they both have, what they both learned. So they're able to learn from each other's notes, because we know that learning is social, and we know that we learn more when we work with others, right? Because somebody might see something in an article or see something in a political cartoon that we didn't originally notice. So they then compare and they write their summaries. So that's the basic overall simple cyber sandwich. Again, like I said, we're going to be looking at the craft sandwich, and we're going to be looking at what some people call the taco. There's also ways that you can incorporate virtual field trips into your cyber sandwich. It doesn't just have to be a reading. It can be a video, it can be a virtual field trip, it could be a couple research articles or videos that they're watching. So if you're interested in learning about this strategy, join me later.
Slam.
All right. Hello. Welcome. I'm Jen Gaston, and I'm co-presenting with Amber Dodd. And I'll start by telling you a little bit about, so our presentation is going to be a dive into some best practices around grading and kind of evolving our thinking and heading towards standards-based grading. And I'll tell you briefly my story. About 5 or 6 years ago, I went to an RTI conference with 2 people very dear to me, and I learned at that conference that they were grading completely differently from myself. One had just transferred here from New York. The other one was fresh out of a new a teacher program, and they had really very different strategies, and my interest was piqued, and they started talking to me about standards-based grading. So for the past 5 years, I've been playing and tweaking and moving around my gradebook. And this year at North High, we are we're kind of launching rethinking about our grading together. And as the ed tech, I thought, I really need to figure out how to do standards-based grading in the grade book, like how to literally set it up. So that launched me into reaching out to other folks in the district who had experience, who were doing this. And I sat down and met with a handful of people. And in doing my research, I ran into Amber Dodd. And I'll pass it over to Amber Dodd for her side of the story.
Yeah, so mine, probably similar timeline. Probably thinking about 5 years ago is when I really started looking at standards-based grading. And I will have to say very much, and I will say this over and over again, that this is very much a journey and not the destination. Jen and I are talking about this as having conversations and thinking about ways of grading, but we are by no means the experts quite yet. Or at least I want to say that for myself when it comes to this, that it has been very much a journey-based conversation. And it was probably about 5 years ago, I went to a conference as well, not the same conference, but went to a different conference and kind of started thinking about standards-based grading and kind of starting hearing about what it means and kind of started toying with it on a very, very base level in my classroom. I actually just switched. The very first step I did was just switch the categories in my grade book from like homework and classwork to reading, writing, and listening and speaking. And even just that switch, the conversations that I was getting and the emails that I was getting from parents was awesome. Instead of getting like, hey, my daughter has like a D in this, or like, why does my daughter have a D? The conversation all of a sudden became, I can see that my daughter has like an A in writing, but a D in like reading. What's the deal? Like, what's going on? And even just breaking down those conversations was really eye-opening for me. So with that, when I switched over to teaching 10th grade English with my PLC, we really started looking at what standards-based grading means and really started doing focus standards and really kind of doing the nitty-gritty work that comes with that of like making rubrics and really focusing and looking at what we're assigning and how we're assigning things. So that's what mine did. And then this semester, Jen reached out and had this brilliant idea of starting these conversations at her site and then even opening it up to a district level. So that's kind of where we are with it now.
I also want to jump in and say, so we had explored a couple of different texts. Amber had suggested grading smarter, not harder, which now my whole staff has. And then I had suggested, because my principal had been talking about grading for equity, and Amber suggested, well, why don't we have a book club? And so we do. And if you come to our presentation, we have details on joining our book club, and our book club's reading Grading for Equity together right now. And what we have for you today is straight out of Joe Feldman's book on grading for equity, basically breaking down, here's the 5 ways to start this process. And so number 1, moving to a 4-point scale instead of a 0 to 100, and talking about the math and the math making sense and being equitable. So we'll have discussions about that.
Number 2 is to evaluate student on content mastery for multiple sources. So really making sure that we're not just taking one test as like the end all be all thing, but we're really looking at that mastery from multiple sources.
And then number 3 is practice being practice, and creating space for students to practice, mess up, and be okay, and allowing retakes and revisions. To the kind of 3 dovetails with number 2, so that it's not about being perfect the first time you try something. It's about being vulnerable enough to try so you can grow and be better.
And then the 4th one is to use those rubrics. And so I really like rubrics so the students understand what's happening and what they're being evaluated on. But also for me, it really forces me what I'm doing. Like, why am I assigning a project? How am I breaking it down? What do I really want students to get away from doing this project? So using rubrics, not just for student understanding, but also for my understanding of what I want, like why I'm doing this assignment or why I'm doing this project.
And then this fifth one is, it's around motivation, but it's also about evaluation. It's not, not doing this project for Miss Dodd or Miss Gaston, you're doing this project for yourself. So can you evaluate your own work? And also peer motivation. Can you present to your peers, and can your peers give you feedback? And having this be more of a currency of, here, I'm turning this in for you for points, and you're giving me this value, and just being back and forth with the teacher, but really having it, the project or whatever it is, be a meaningful experience for the students, and that feedback circle to be inclusive with their peers in the entire class is kind of community building instead of just currency between student teacher points. So if this is interesting to you, and or we've piqued some questions, there's definitely a lot of points in here where people will be like, oh, I feel uncomfortable on this, or I feel like, oh, I'm curious about this one. And I really want to say that everything in here, it's kind of a pick and choose. And like Amber said, it's a journey. I did not go 5 years ago from traditional grading to standards-based. I'm like still evolving and changing and thinking about and tweaking my grade. Every semester, my grade book looks a little different. So yeah, if you
and I can say, and to jump on that, I can see questions already happening in the chat and stuff. And this is something like, it is a journey, and we are of course working within the confines of what our state requirements are, and what our like district requirements are, and what happens with our with synergy and everything like that. So it is very, very much a journey, and working within the confines of what we have to work with as well. But we really just want this to be a conversation, and to start opening conversations, is to start thinking about best practices when it comes to grading, because we can talk all day long about content and curriculum, but one thing that usually gets left out is our grading practices. So we want to talk about grading practices. All right. And then, yeah. Oh, and then just real quick, if there's a resource guide there that you guys can check out too, if you guys are just interested in filling it out. And slam.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley Schaefer. I work at North Salinas High School. I am both an intervention specialist and a teacher. And my session is going to be about connectedness, social emotional learning, or SEL check-ins. So as you might guess from knowing my job title, where I'm coming from has a lot to do with kind of the social emotional wellness of our students. And I think most of us can probably agree that this is a time in our world, in our lives, where social emotional wellness is really, really important. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Why use SEL check-ins? Well, when it comes to social emotional learning, and I'll go into this a little bit more in the session, it's really about those soft skills that students are learning through adolescence and young adulthood that are going to lead them to have healthy, happy, productive lives. So that's the self-awareness, the self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. These are things that intrinsically we are teaching, even when not intentionally. And so my argument is, let's be a little bit intentional with how we teach students and give them opportunities to practice these skills. So starting with something really, really simple, which is just check-ins, checking in with students, asking how they're doing. Why use them? They help you to build relationships between you and your students, and foster relationships between the students themselves. It helps you to increase engagement and buy-in, which I know is huge right now in distance learning, really, really hard for a lot of us to get students to log in and be present. It helps students to feel seen and cared for. I've had so many students talk with many of us, but myself too, about just how hard everything has been for them, just as well as for us. So it's a difficult time where people are feeling isolated and lonely and confused and sometimes very scared. So something really simple just to help your students feel seen and cared for. You can use these check-ins for checks for understanding as well. So they can be kind of coupled with content. Can help you to understand what students are interested in, what's going on with their lives, so that you can better connect content to their lives, and just generally help you to build a strong classroom culture, even if the classroom is a virtual classroom. So that's kind of the overview for SEL check-ins. And you can go to the next slide. One thing you might be asking yourself is this just like one more thing I have to do? There's so much on all of our plates. And the answer is no. SEL check-ins can really fit in seamlessly with your current routines. You can make them match what feels comfortable to you, what feels comfortable to your students. You can make sure that you're using SEL check-ins that are fitting within your content already. You don't have to change anything. It's really just adding a little bit of spice. It's not linked to any one tech tool. My session is not going to be about, oh, you must use this tech tool, or, oh, I'm going to explain you that tech tool. It's really about how you can take a concept and adapt it to whatever tech tools you feel comfortable using. And in my session, we'll take a look at and share some sample questions, look at some sample templates. You'll have some time to think about and plan out how you might want to bring SEL check-ins into your own routines, your current routines, what you found works for you in the fall. You can kind of add a little bit of spice if you're not already this spring. So yeah, that's my session. I'm really happy also though to talk to people. If you don't come to this session and you just want to talk SEL check-ins, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy always to chat. Thanks, Slim.
Morning, everyone. Mark Gomez, the History Social Science Curriculum Specialist on special assignment right now with the district. And my session today will be talking about engaging more students, similar to what Ashley was saying, through an inquiry-driven kind of approach. And you can go next slide. I think one thing I'll say is, I guess I'm really super impressed with the offering here. So I guess my first question to potential participants would be, how would you run your own session if I were to just go to everyone else's session? Because everyone else's session looks really interesting. But really it's about, my session will be about asking questions and how to help students ask their own questions. So a couple questions for you all this morning are on the slide here. When was the last time you tracked how many questions you're asking our students? Next slide. And similarly, you know, how many opportunities are we allowing, or are you building in for our students to be able to ask you questions? And then what's your response when they are asking you questions? And is it okay for you to say no? I'm really interested in Jen's session. So the next slide, I don't know if any of you have been doom scrolling lately, but every once in a while you get some good messages, right? So these are two tweets from the now infamous Wednesday, which seems so long ago, but also is so present and real. Just a couple of educators reminding teachers that it's okay to not know the answers, right? So we'll talk about moving our pedagogical kind of practices and thinking about how we structure our classes, not so much around answers, but more around questions and more about questions that students actually have. Because if you can imagine how many questions you might have spinning around in your head on any given day in this pandemic, especially post-insurrection, we might multiply that by a certain amount for our students, right? Who really just must be teeming with a bunch of questions that we would like them to invite them into to use in the service of learning about the world and how they might interact in it. Next slide, please. One thing I might ask you to think about is in the sandbox session, if you could at least maybe not plan the whole semester, but maybe one lesson where you didn't provide one single answer, right? But actually structured a process for students to come up with enough questions to guide them through their learning, and then connect what content or what skills that you have planned on teaching to that. And next slide. So obviously, this is not a tech-heavy session, but I think it's very adaptable, similar to what Ashley was saying, right? Questions drive learning, and sometimes we forget that. So this is a reminder on how to do that. In the last slide, I believe, more specifically, this one particular technique that we'll be diving into deeper is called the QFT, and that comes from the Right Question Institute. So I'll be showing not only examples of QFTs, but also taking you through an experiential of what it feels like for a learner. And then we'll talk about how it can guide research formulation, you know, set students on the path to answering those questions that they come up with, how to get them talking about you know, the questions and ideas that are coming from them, and then just how to sustain that curiosity throughout the course of the semester. And that will be our session. So hope to see some of you then. Slam. I was hoping you'd play the Onyx song, Slam, this morning, but I'll keep wishing.
I am Caroline Edwards, and I'm going to be discussing using Google Slides to create choice boards and what that means for the students, along with what everyone else is discussing. The most important thing right now through distance learning is engagement, and how do we keep those students engaged? Can you go to the next slide, please? The what? If you ask 10 teachers what is a choice board or an interactive playlist, you'll probably get 10 different answers. For simplicity, we will say that a choice board or an interactive playlist is a tool that we give to the students for them to have a voice, for them to take control of what they're learning, not necessarily what they're learning, how they're learning, and how they are going to display their learning. While challenging them with the depth of knowledge exercises, one thing, it's not a to-do list. So we don't just say do this in order, we just say choose one. The why is to give the students ownership of their learning so they get a choice. We're leveraging your time to allow for small group instruction. Choice boards and playlists are intentional, goal-driven, and data-driven. The how, this is where your rubber is going to meet the road. Whether you're creating a choice board or a playlist, your activities need to be based on Webb's depth of knowledge, so the DOKs. We're going to go over that in our section, while also being engaging and rigorous. So you don't just want to offer 9 tier 1 activities that are surface level. You really want to have the students have to really exercise their mind and come up with what they're going to do with an end in mind. Choice boards and interactive playlists can do just that. I'm going to show you several websites that have this information on it. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to show you the tic-tac-toe board, what that looks like. I'm going to show you what a menu is and a playlist. We have, sometimes when you attend PD, they give you a choice board and you can select which PD you want to go to, and you have to have a product that comes with it. All of those PDs that typically come on your choice board are developed with the end in mind. So what is the end product? What is the task that we want our kids to be able to solve? And then how do we get them there? So I'm going to go through each one, what it looks like. We're going to actually create some of our own. I'm going to show you how to link things in them. A lot of times you may have created these in the past, but we create them as hard copies and we print them out and we send them, we give them to our students in class. Now that we don't have them in front of us, the digital component comes into play and how beneficial it can be for the students. So I'm going to show you all of that. On the next slide, there's an example. This is from APD, and you have your different colors. It looks very pretty. You can link videos, you can link to Google Forms, you can link to other Google Slides. Anything that you want to put in this that you would like your students to complete, we can do that, and I am going to show you that. So please feel free to join me.
Slam. All right, so I am last today, and I'm going to be talking about the power of social media and how you can use it in your class to do many different things. So if you can go to the next slide. It's going to be interesting to see how many Schitt's Creek fans are on this call. So a lot of times people think social media is like, oh, keep it out of school. Like you can't have kids on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever during class. Like no way. But says who? Like why couldn't you have it? Why couldn't you wrap that into how you're doing your class already? Like why not add that so that we can make our learning global and not just within the walls or within the Zoom grid, whatever it might be. Next slide. I think, something's frozen. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about Facebook and how you can use Facebook to increase parent and family engagement. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. You could have a group or you could have a Facebook page, depending on your desires. But if you have a group, you can invite your parents, and then it's just for those people that are in the group can see it, but you can post updates on what the class is doing. You can celebrate wins from your class. You can share awesome student work. You can post, I don't know, anything that's happening in your class that you want to share and celebrate. So it can be a really great way to engage families and parents because, next slide. I had it. My punchline is getting dragged on here without being able to control the screen. I don't. Next slide. She seems to maybe be frozen. I'm gonna switch sharing. Maybe that'll help. Am I the only one not seeing this slide change?
It's not changing.
It's not changing. Okay. So yeah, I think Brianna was having problems with internet or whatever it might be. So I am going to start sharing. That would be those technical difficulties we were just talking about. Rolling with the punches, right? Okay. All right. So the reason why you might want to get parents in to get your class on Facebook and have a group like this would be because you want to get into their phone. Because if you think about it, what are parents always on? What are parents always looking at? They're looking at their phone, right? They're accessing, they're talking to their friends, especially right now, because that's how we can, that's how we contact everybody. During this pandemic, that's a lot of our social life is on our phones. So if you can get into their phone, you're in their pocket. You have access to them at any time, and they have access to you at any time. Now, that doesn't mean that you are
You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, somebody, I don't know what happened. Somebody muted me. So have I been muted this whole time or? Okay. So you want to, if you think about it, you want to get into they're going to be in their phone all the time, and that gives them access to you all the time. It gives you access to them all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that you are going to be, having to interact with them at 7 p.m. or 9 p.m. or whatever. It means that you can interact with them whenever you're ready, and then they can interact with you whenever they're ready. So maybe you post something in the afternoon after, before you stop working, but then they're able to look at it whenever they're on Facebook and they get a notification. And that's that hook of why you want to use Facebook or social media to engage with families and parents. I figured out why I muted myself because I hit spacebar. Also, Twitter is not just to see what politicians are posting, but it is also one of the things people may not realize is how many educators are on Twitter, how many education consultants are on Twitter, how many specialists are on Twitter, education companies. And through Twitter, they are sharing massive amounts of content. And so by getting on Twitter and starting a professional learning network and connecting to people on Twitter, you have yourself access to tons and tons and tons of resources. So if you're looking for help with a lesson or even like a full lesson plan sometimes, or you're like, oh shoot, things changed and I need to come up with a different lesson tomorrow. Maybe there's something already created that somebody has shared, or resources or brand ideas or whatever it might be. It's also a way for you to share your wealth because you guys are doing tons of work creating amazing content, amazing lessons and tutorials and examples of work and whatever it might be. So in addition to taking, you're also giving. And from that, you end up working so much smarter and much less harder because you're sharing brains with everybody. So again, like Moira says, when one of us shines, all of us shine. So sharing is definitely that's one of the things I use Twitter for the most. So especially if I have to train somebody on something in this position, I don't have anything prepared, it's last minute, I'll go on Twitter, I'll search a hashtag, maybe it's like Flipgrid or something, and I'll find tons of resources just for training students, for training teachers, for ideas and lessons and all kinds of stuff.